Vernier webinar. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the STEM Alliance and Vernier webinar, Applications of Data Logging in Sports. This webinar is co-organized by the STEM Alliance, Scientix and Vernier Education. My name is Luigi Brisco, and I work at European Schoolnet as a project support coordinator for the STEM Alliance. Together with us today in the room, we have in the background my colleagues Rocio Benito, Diego Fernandez, and Camilla Zonta, who will be supporting this webinar from a technical point of view. If you have any issues with your audio or connection, please write in the chat. Before going through the agenda for today, let me share some technical details. Microphone and cameras are turned off, but don't worry, because if you have any questions for our speakers for today, simply type them in the chat and we will address them at the end of this webinar. Also, in the chat, we will be sharing valuable information and helpful links throughout the webinar. Also, please fill the signature list. We will share the link in the chat. And after that, we will give the floor to our speakers. The session will explore the integration of sensor technologies, machine learning algorithms, and real-time data analytics in capturing intricate details of athletic movements and physiological responses. The objective is to furnish attendees and participants with a comprehensive understanding of how data logging can be effectively utilized to enhance both individual and team performances in various sport disciplines. Finally, at the end of the webinar, we will dedicate some time to go through the questions that you have for our speakers. And in the chat, as I was saying, you can find the link for the signature list. It is very important that you fill the form, because this is necessary to validate your participation to the webinar. And also, this is to prove that this event took place, and so that we can continue to organize events like this in the future. Also, filling the signature list is necessary to receive a certificate of participation after the webinar. It is my pleasure to welcome today our speakers, Vincent English and Peter Czech. Vincent is the CEO of Vernier Europe, a subsidiary of Vernier Education, the world's largest manufacturer of digital data collection technologies for schools. He is also a distinguished academic, holding a professorship at Uninettuno, University of Rome, and visiting positions at business schools in Naples and Geneva. Petr is a renowned Czech international footballer, known for his remarkable career in both national and club teams, holding numerous goalkeeping records and awards. Beyond football, Czech impressively pursued higher education, holding an MBA with distinction and currently working on a doctorate. Thank you so much for being here with us, presenting and discussing today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Luigi. Thank you so much for joining us. Peter and I are excited to impart some of our wisdom on what data logging means and how data logging can affect not only education, industry in general, but also sport. So Peter and I will jointly present this. I will talk from an academic standpoint. Peter will talk from a very practical standpoint. And also, just so you know, Peter is on the path to becoming a distinguished academic himself, because his doctoral degree is going to be about sustainability of the Champions League and how data could prove to be a pivotal part of that, to be what we call now possibly the sixth force in business. So no doubt we will talk a bit about that as we go along. But to start with, we're talking about data logging in sports and a wide variety of sports, and the critical role that it plays. Possibly those who are not directly involved in the running of sports, whether it's on the athletic side or the business side, probably don't appreciate just how important data has become. And Peter and I, through our journey, me as his professor and Peter has been the researcher, we have spoken to a lot of people at different ends of the game, both the owners and the CEOs, as much as the managers and the players, and getting their perspective of how important data is quite extraordinary these days. So that's what this PowerPoint presentation will be about. We will jump into data and show you how it works in football and other sports, and then we will then move in then to its application and how you might be able to mimic that in your classrooms. So then data or tracking data involves essentially gathering lots of information. Information is gathered from many sensors. It is then put into, as Luigi said at the beginning, an algorithm. And the algorithm these days do pull an awful lot from artificial intelligence, and they're very predictive in what they try to do. And we have lots of algorithms based around machine learning, in particular artificial neural networks. And that is meant to be an algorithm that learns along with the data and is able to make what we call very highly predictive predictions to help the coaches and to help the team understand when or how they're training and whether they're training too much or too little. So, in any sports domain, you'll see cameras placed almost everywhere, whether it's around the pitch, whether it's around a ice skating rink, and Peter is now in the second career, the goalkeeper for an ice hockey team. You can't keep a good man down, Peter. And it's all the same, it's all the same companies providing all this data and gaining valuable insights into that. So now, Peter, we're going to talk about a little bit now about player and team improvement and how data not only allows the coaches to understand better how the players are doing, but also how the coach tries to understand how the players are doing. You've lots of experience in this. We spoke with Jurgen Klopp a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, about his issues and the challenges he finds with data. So, Peter, is there any sort of, we talked about a lot of things like injury prevention, didn't we? And when it's time to recognize when a player needs to rest and when a player, can you elaborate a wee bit on that, maybe from some examples and experience you have?
So good evening or good afternoon, everyone. I would say, this topic is very important, and as well, there is a lot of areas now in sport or in a team or as a player individually use the data. And I was the first time I was introduced to kind of data collection using the GPS tracking data. It was in 2008. So I played first part of my career without having any data, which I can tell you, it brings a lot of challenges because it all depends on your feelings, the feeling of the coach, on sort of basic understanding on the physical work, and this leads to your question about the load and the injury prevention, because when we used to have pre-seasons, we would have a heart rate monitors. Yeah, so some sort of physical research was based about how big heart rate range you should reach during the exercise. Yeah, but then you realize that every single player is a different, it has a different body structure. Every single player has a different foundation, physical condition. And so basically running in one group, it was, some people were underloaded, some people were totally overloaded, and then some people were in perfect range. But you couldn't really, modify it too much because there was no tracking, and you couldn't really see how much it influenced each of the players. Nowadays, you have the courtesy of getting all these tracking data. You have them for years now. So, if you have players for a couple of seasons, 3 seasons, more seasons, obviously you gather more and more information about the player, and it can help you to tailor-made the program for the player. And this is very important for for the prevention and the injury prevention, because you can always find patterns. Now we talk about the pattern recognitions. So, for example, you can have a look after each game. You can have a look how much high intensity the player had, how much running had to do, whatever it was. Yeah, but after some time, if you collect the data, for example, you can find a pattern in a player's injury record where you go, when the player had 3 games in a row above certain level of intensity or high running speed, yeah, and it exceeded certain level, then the game after he got injured. And if it happened 3 or 4 times, the probability that actually this might happen again, it's there again. So you can then go, and usually the scientist or the person responsible from the sports science goes to speak to the manager and says, listen, it's your call, is your choice, but there is a game and there is a high probability based on the data that this player XYZ might get injured because he's exactly in that point where it happened before. So it helps you to think about, okay, do I really need him? Do I really need to risk if you get there or not? And then it's the choice of the coach. Sometimes you say, well, it's too important at this moment for my team, so I know it might happen. So, but I risk it, and then if that happens, then you have to assume your choices, and if not, obviously you go, okay, we got one away. It doesn't mean it happens, but there is a risk. So these are the things which can help you to understand where the player is, but it needs to be applied in the right context as well, because sometimes having 3 games over certain level of certain intensity doesn't mean that you reach the players at risk in a long term. So there should always be the collection and the context of each individual to know where you stand with it. So I think that, but in a simplified way, these pattern recognitions and all the tracking data you get nowadays, it can help you to find these pattern recognition. And obviously, if you do it well and apply it well, it can save you a lot of money, because the injured money is actually the biggest money loss you get in a football club.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Peter. We had that very discussion with Jurgen Klopp. He was saying that there's a tension there between the manager who might want him to play. There's a player who always wants to play, and it's the medical scientist who's saying, "Hey, it's too risky for him to play," and this is the importance that data can look into that. And our mutual friend Cleggy at Man United, he will always, the first data he will look at is how well they slept the night before. As opposed to what he can expect for the week ahead. So data is now becoming not only important from the point of view of predictions of what likely to happen down the road that the naked eye can't see, but it's also becoming very important in, as you said, creating patterns of knowledge. That you can now look to see, is the squad correctly put together in the right type of players for the right type of the year. Now there's probably not enough time here, but a year ago I had an in-depth discussion with a guy who was in charge of data for the Seattle Sounders, that American team that did very well over many years, and it was all based purely 100% on data. 100% on data. So that was very very interesting. Yep.
I think the same applies in a way. When we talk about what you do, how much load you do with the player, and when we talk about the context should be always the performance.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you want the player to perform the best possible way. So if you set some sort of load or range, and then your player is always out of shape and is always not performing, there's one way. But we try to find the pattern in how the player reach the top performance, the peak of this performance. So if you take a cycle of 6 weeks and then you say you take a particular player and you suddenly realize he's now playing his best game, he tells you that he feels the best, he feels fit, he feels strong, he feels like he's on top of his game, then you can actually track the data back. And then you look at the cycle of 6 weeks and then you go, okay, the player had this type of load in previous 4 weeks, and then he hit the best form. So it can give you actually an advantage that you can keep, by tracking data, you can actually keep the player in the same load, in the same rhythm, which you give him a probability, a possibility to keep him in the form as long as possible. So it works obviously for the health and injury prevention, but it helps you as well to recognize when and in which condition the players hit their best form and how they perform in certain periods of time. And then the manager has all sort of advantage on their hands, because they know that the player might have dip on form in November, but then he picks up again, because it happens every year, and then you can either find a way to deal with it and improve it, or you just know. And so there are little things which in the end play a big part in the entire season. And as I said, the data, the context in which you prepare and you use the data to your advantage is always the most important thing.
Well, you're right. Contextual data is key. If you haven't got context. So here's an example here, Peter, of a camera facing down on a pitch here in a training program where the data is surrounding each one of the players. We'd have sensors in here, Peter, which would be things like the GPS system, given their positioning, the accelerometer, possibly X, Y, and Z axis to show the acceleration in 3 dimensions. A gyroscope as well for the angular velocity, see how they're taking shots and stuff. Magnometers or magnometers that shows the direction in which they're running too. So there's an awful lot of sensors there, on a small little patch behind the shirt collar, that a huge amount of data is taken from. So you, as a former director of football, in addition to being a footballer at Chelsea, how important was the training data that you would take on in Cobham at the training centre? Is that something that you would work on as much?
It was really essential for the planning. So there would be always a meeting between the head of the sports science and the fitness coach and the coach. They would always discuss the type of session, because in the end of the day, to make it simple, you need all parties involved. So if you take the data and you tell the coach, okay, the player should be in this load in terms of this speed, this range, this intensity, and this amount of time, it's one thing. But then if the coach has not a big experience with it, he will tell you, okay, but what sort of exercise, what sort of session brings that? So that's why the cameras are so important. Film the session, because then then you get the data, and then you can look at the specific part of the training session in which the player reached the data you desire for him to reach. And then the coach can then say, okay, if we need to go close to that, probably the session will be structured this way, that we have this type of exercise, or small-sided games, or a large space if you want people to reach long distance and high speed. So there is a lot of variation you can use, and you can get it out of the and if you know that the right back, for example, makes long distance sprints over the games because they overlap, they go to cross. So you need to implement that in their training sessions. And sometimes, unfortunately, if you play small-sided games, they will not hit it. So the important thing is as well to for the sports scientist to say, well, he would need to hit at least 1 or twice the speed over 28 kilometers an hour, for example. Then you have 2 options. You explain to the player that on course of the game, he needs to make that run, no matter how, or you just say, well, if we don't hit it, then at the end of the training session, we just put you from one line to another, and then you just run it 3 times, and your job is done. So, it's about communication, is about, explanation that the players as well understand it. But nowadays, I think as the the data becomes a normal part of our lives, now everybody wants to know too. When you go home from the training session, you might have some feeling, but you want to see it on the paper as well, to say, well, I've done a good session and I hit my targets and I've done this and I've done that. And once you have this synergy within the players and the data, then it helps, because people buy into it, people believe in it, and then they can use it in the right way.
Yeah, exactly. And no doubt the training sessions and the data will change according to the opposition you're playing and where you're playing, I guess, as well. You would tailor that even more, right? Or no?
Of course, nowadays you find the patterns of the play. Sorry, I need to put lights on because you will not see me. I don't know what happened
automatic
here.
light.
I don't know what happened here. But
I think you have to keep waving your hands more, I think, than the light knows you're there.
But I'm back. But what I wanted to say is that you have obviously now you can find tactical data about space, where you find the space. You can use that when you prepare for opposition. But the most I've seen the data used now, it's for the set play. Because when you have any corners and any free kicks, then obviously all the data gives you an idea who you play and how your opposition defend the box when the cross comes in. You know where are the weak points, you know where are the first point of the contact, second point of contact, you know which players are actually the most dangerous one. So when you defend your goal, you can actually put your strongest player with the one is the strongest in the other side. And these are big help. And obviously, goalkeepers use all the probabilities and the data for set plays, free kicks, for penalties, especially. Nowadays, you see everybody has a homework on on the players. So this becomes more and more everyday use in any sport. Ice hockey does the tracking data too. Now every other sport, obviously, if they have the opportunity, they will start using it too, because in tennis, where you are supposed to play the ball to get advantage over your opponent. If you know somebody cross court backhand is their shot, and it's coming 8 times out of 10, then obviously you can prepare tactically, and the same works in football too.
Yeah, exactly. So video capture, you've mentioned that there, Petter, a few times, and I see the catapult system is the one that's very commonly used in Premier League football teams and everywhere else. But it's also being used an awful lot in scouting now, where it can be an app on the phone, it can be an app on the iPad, and all this never-ending statistical data, heat maps, where a player goes, how he tracks, what he does, what he doesn't do. And it's changed the whole face of everything. From, and I remember one of our conversations before where you were saying that even in the grassroots, they want to have the tracking devices on them now too, because they want to be like the big guys. So is there a danger of us becoming over data?
Well, I think this is exactly the part where you need to have the right context, because I was saying, to the coach, I said, okay, now you have a grassroots team that they will have a sensor and it will come to the mobile app. And I said, but what do you do with the data? How do you classify it, that you actually, who you compare to and how? And then how do you know this player work better than another when you don't have any previous set of data? So I said to him, well, as much as it's frustrating, you need to collect the data for some time. And I think the biggest challenge you always have is when you get a new player, because obviously you don't have all the previous data. You might have data from games, and but you don't have your kind of tailor-made data, the one you use to your system, or how the prevention and stuff like that is. That's the biggest that's the biggest question always, like how much the player used to do, because when you know the player, the danger is that you bring a player in who is kind of used to be overloaded all the time. Yeah, and then you suddenly you sort of make him work not so hard. It might be more efficient, but then he might not feel ready. He might feel psychologically that, oh, I'm not doing enough, and that's always the question. When you have players for some time, obviously you know exactly the patterns, you get the data, and you know how to use it. So that's why the context has to be right, to find the right balance. Because, for example, some leagues, if you bring a player from a different league, yeah, they are not exposed to certain elements of the game. So, for example, if you look at number 6, the holding midfielder in France, generally they don't have really high intensity speed or high speeds, because they're the tactical position of the number 6 in France usually is to sit in front of the defense and not to go and cover too much space. So you sometimes look at the data and you think, oh, this guy can't run. He doesn't do enough runs. He doesn't have enough intensity. But that's why the video capture is so important, because then you look at this and you say, oh, actually, it's a tactical. This is a tactical thing. It's not that the player can't do it. It's just you don't see it doing it because he actually plays in a team which sits deep, and actually it doesn't allow him to collect the data. So it doesn't mean the player can't do it. It doesn't mean that it is the player's like a default. So there are certain things you suddenly get him over, and you know that he will have to run in training certain high speed runs, because in the Premier League he will need it. So then you condition him again, but you know exactly what he's lacking. You know exactly what you can improve him on, and that's the great part that the data actually gives. Because you might go to speak to the player and you explain, and they will go, "Oh, I don't feel like that." And in previous years was, "I don't feel like that." How do you persuade the player? But if you bring the data and you show and you say, "Listen, we've got that, and this is where you play better, and this is when you do that, you actually play much better, and you can see it, black on white." Even the player goes, "You're right, and I'm gonna think about it more." So that's the other advantage, that you have sort of like a lever that you can use for the player to go certain direction.
And the context is so important. Here's Steven Gerrard being hauled off a game simply because it was the algorithm that Liverpool used was showing that if he stayed on that pitch much longer, he was more likely to get injured. So here is an example of the guy with the iPad sitting beside the manager that says, "Hey, we need to get this guy off, or he's going to be out for the next 2 or 3 weeks." So it's everything is in context, as you absolutely right, Peter. And whatever data our teachers here use in the classroom too, it always has to be within context. It always has to be situated such that they can take some measure against what the data means. Does 9.81 a good result, or is it a bad result? It has got to be a context or a benchmark in which to measure against there.
I think, for example, when we talk about the education, it's the same as when you have players, like when you have a team meeting, and this is something where obviously might help you. I don't know like how well it can be done, but you have a lot of people who learn by seeing just things written on the wall. Some people just see the graph and you show them the pattern. I want you to play there, and you move in here, and they look and they go, okay, fine, easy. But you have people in that team who actually don't get it, and you have to physically take them on the pitch and actually put them right where you want them, and to say, okay, this is what I was talking about. Some people need both. Because if they see it only one way or another, so then obviously the coach is something for a coach or for any educator to understand which way the player sees game and the way they learn, that you can actually teach them as efficiently you can. And that's something and it's relative to every player, even the performance, the rating, sometimes you look and you go, oh, this guy doesn't look good, and you don't give him. But then if you look in his history and you say, well, he never played in that position and he's never done that before, and he actually managed to get at that level in a very short period of time. So obviously it's relative, but you can say, well, it's actually he's done well. So there are two, again, we go to the context of in which the player perform, and sometimes you might be surprised.
But it's also so finely tuned as well, especially when it comes to injury prevention. Well, you'd know better than me, obviously, but when I hear at Man United how they specifically tailor-make the training programs for specific players, based on their specific needs. And if, for example, now I don't want to give too much away, but I think you know the story I'm referring to. A player from Chelsea over the summer went to Manchester United and then spent the first 4 or 5 weeks injured, and that really shouldn't have happened. But it happened because he stood outside of the training regime that Man United had put in place for him, got his own personal trainer, completely overturned what the regime should have been, and unknown to himself, got injured enough to be out for 4 or 5 weeks.
And I think this is the point where sometimes if you strictly just keep the data without listening to as well how people feel and what they want to do, this is what it can lead to. Because you do it in the right way. The only what you see, you do the right thing, but then you don't see what's behind the scenes. And we always try to find a way that if the player felt like they don't do enough, that they come and say, I do not feel I've done enough, I want to do that. And then you can tell him, okay, do it this way or do it that way, or you try to explain not to do it, because what happens, not to do it, but they will do it. So you sort of have to give them something you want to control, and you say, okay, do it, but do it this way. If you do that, we will be okay. And then you control it, because if you have someone who then goes home, and we had some cases, I've seen as a player, my teammates, you see the guy, you see the guy running 50%, and I can't do this, I don't feel like today, I'm a bit tired, and then you let them off the hook, and you understand that, so the coach say, okay, fine. And then you find a video on YouTube or Instagram or Snapchat,
exactly,
and the player has 150 kilo on the bar making squats, and you just go, that's wrong, because all your system flies out of window. So sometimes you really need to listen to the player as well, the way they feel, how they see things, because you don't want them to actually start doing things on their own. In the time where you can't control it, and then obviously everything becomes too complicated. So I think that's gonna be the challenge for the modern world, like of football or sport or anything, because you get access to so many information
instant
that people will like. How do you persuade them that what you tell them is actually more relevant when what they see somewhere else? Because they will say, well, this guy, I like the way he did it, and he did this way, so I'm not listening to you, I'm doing that. So that's the danger of, how do you persuade? So if you have a really good context, you have a really good data set, you have you can explain to people why it is and why it is for their benefit. You don't do it for yourself, it should be for the benefit of the performance. That's what counts the most, the performance. Then I think the players will understand that, and then not only players, anybody, even a student or whoever you work with will understand that, and you probably have a better chance of moving them on your side rather than against you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a few conversations about that already. So even like, it doesn't have to necessarily be humans, but things like car racing, the NASCAR rally, for example, use the same catapult system, but they're using it for vehicle performance now. You know, they're looking at how the aerodynamics factor, things like the various sensors embedded in maybe even driver safety or pit stop strategy or the race simulation. They may do simulations of the race and see how they match the simulation with the real time. Fuel management, the power of the engine, and also as well data. And we've discussed this as well, Peter, a few times. And we discussed this with one of the CEOs of a football club about how they're using data to engage fans a bit more as well, not only from car racing to football. There is a basketball team, I think, in the United States that allows the fans to vote on who should be the next substitute in real time, and whether or not the coach takes their advice, I'm not too sure. But it is showing how data is migrating itself around outside of the performance into the fan engagement, and how sports has been consumed now by fans. And here we're touching now a little bit on your research on looking at how to make the Champions League a little bit more sustainable. And how do we engage fans, and how do we engage teams and clubs with teams to engage that content more and to be more immersed in the experience, you know? So data around football stadiums, and in fact your master's thesis, Peter, I think was about this, if I remember correctly, that we are looking at the intelligent stadium, or the connected stadium, wasn't that what it was? How data can be captured from everything from the fan profile on the apps to how the app delivers information in real time. And even one of my other students was doing a marketing thing, and it was with Manchester United. And the information that came back from the CEO to her was that we are looking for the ultimate fan engagement here, so that we can communicate with the fans in real time with their mobile phones. So we can drop what we call NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, onto their app. Oh, if you go up to the stands now, you'll get a free hamburger. There's a free cup of coffee waiting for you, and in immersing the fans in the full experience. And we see the developments now, for example, in virtual reality. You know, even the metaverse. Is it possible soon that there could be an identical game that's happening in real life happen within the metaverse simultaneously? And will it allow fans to become a number seven and spatially see everything around him? Oh my God, here comes Martial, or here comes somebody else, or if you're the goalkeeper, right, which way do I dive? I take over the role in real time, and the algorithms are doing the calculations for me in real time. You know, this is quite possibly, Peter, I don't know what you think, but this is quite possibly where this could be heading, because we see Wrexham right now. Wrexham goalkeeper has a camera on his chest, so the fans can get that immersive experience in the game. So I don't know what you think about how this is heading. Do you think this has got some traction?
You know, in the end of the day, any sport without fans can't exist. And as we have the technology taking over normal lives, you know, you have everything on the click of the button. At home, you know, you have smart homes, you have now smart mobile phones, you have smart cars. Like, I think the next will be really the smart stadiums, because you will want people to have the same experience they would have at home. And if you think that most of the, you know, the fans that are at the stadium, it's a very small percent of those who are probably watching the game. Yeah. So if you take Premier League, which goes to 295 countries around the world, then obviously the full stadium, no matter how, if you have 80,000 or 60,000, 40,000, it's a very small, you know, percentage of how many fans. Yeah, you can see it here, how many fans are actually at the stadium, and how many they are watching at home. So you want to almost make that experience for them too. And as the data take over, then a lot of people wants to know what's the possession, how the players run, what they do. And then, you know, you wanna when you sit at home and watch the TV, you can pick yourself up and you make a couple of steps and you are in the fridge, you pour your beer, you get your hamburger, you get your food, you get whatever you want. And then if you're in the stadium, I think people get used to that. They don't want to wait 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes in the queue. So obviously a smart stadium, if you can order from your seat and pick it up, and then you get your shirt, and because you did it online and you bought something with it, and you get a token or free meal or free coffee, or like it brings an extra experience. And I think like you touch on the VR, that virtual reality, it's used in training now. You can do a practice because there are certain elements of the game where it's related to scanning, the reading the game, and your peripheral vision, the way you use your eyes, and you can replicate it in training. So basically now the virtual reality, you put the player in a situation you want them to work on, what you want them to see. So now it improves as well. Ice hockey is a game. It's a Sense Arena, the company who makes training sessions for ice hockey goalkeepers. So you can do whole your session at home in your hotel room, and you can actually work on scanning, reading the game, getting on your reactions, and you can do that with football. I used to do that. Now when you have a lot of building up from the game, the goalkeepers has to play more and more and more. So sometimes you don't have time to work on that, so you put the virtual reality, and you pick the pass, you pick the best play, you pick you see the space. And that's something the fans will enjoy too. So if you can put yourself in position of Lionel Messi, and then you just go, oh, this is where he is, this is what he sees, and then you just go, oh, I would do that, and then you see that he does completely something different. Then you just go, okay, maybe that's why he's on that pitch, and then I have the VR on my head in my room. But it gives you, it might bring more fans, because people are now used to, as the generation, like everybody, the generation starts getting more into technology, watching, playing PlayStations and doing, making a lot more things in virtual reality. Then obviously that's gonna be something. If you want to keep the people engaged, then you will have to, work on, in the ideal way. You want as many as people to be involved and have the taste of it, and then I think that's probably one way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, esports. That's why it's getting very popular. So even, for example, now using this sensor technology that Adidas has recently trialed and released, it just gives them everything from the angle of the shot, how you land, how you run, how you play, how you jump, all in a small little data logger that's loaded up real time. What's your angle of taking a shot? How strong was the shot, and so on, like that. Another area which is really being subject to a lot of digital disruption is the area of healthcare, where you're going to start seeing people going to gyms and being able to connect to a doctor online, or being able to connect to their insurance online, and if they're fit, then the premium goes down, and all that kind of stuff. But even now, for example, the likes of Swift, who is a manufacturer of bicycles, allows you to immerse yourself into a virtual race as well. And it tracks your change and how fast you go, and how in the Tour de France, whatever you want to be, you can be that professional sportsman for that half an hour that you just immerse yourself. And exactly as as you run, or the bicycle goes fast or goes slow, and then you can overtake and all that kind of stuff too. So sorry, Peter, you're going to say something there.
I think, like, this is the great example, the Swift, because that probably saved a lot of people during lockdown. I started using this program during the lockdown, because you had to work from home, and I can tell you, if I go on bike, I want to be outside. I want to feel like I'm taking the kilometers, the miles, the nature's going around, and sitting in my garage on the bike, which that does not move. It's not the best experience, and it kind of it felt a bit, psychologically, it felt like for me, I'm doing too much. Yeah. But once I started using Swift and you go competing with other people, you would be amazed how much you
Motivation.
push,
Mm,
how much you ride, and how much
mm,
more time
mm,
you spend with it,
mm,
because you have a feeling like there is that little guy in front of me and I'm catching him. So if I do
mhm,
it for 10 more minutes, I do that. So I think that's a great example how you can actually use the virtual
mm,
reality
mm,
to
mm,
enhance your training session, because it gives you a little bit more purpose,
mm,
or it's more
mm,
fun. Anything
mm,
we do that as well. When sometimes you have training sessions where
mm.
there will be like a boring section of it, but how do you keep the motivation, and how do
Yeah,
you keep people feeling?
yeah,
You put some competition
yeah,
in there. You
yeah,
start counting
yeah,
every shot, you start
yeah,
counting every goal, and then you put two teams, and then suddenly the whole training session have a completely different
yeah. Interesting.
atmosphere and
Yeah,
vibe.
yeah,
And this is one of those things which you can
yeah,
actually
yeah,
put
yeah,
yourself in there, and
yeah.
it's more fun. Yeah.
It's about connecting the data, isn't it, really? And also decision and sports. We won't dwell too much along here, but we had some interesting conversations with managers recently that wasn't too impressed with the VAR, the video assistant referee, and Hawkeye, and so
I
on.
think the
But
Hawkeye, I think the Hawkeye and goal line technology is simple, because it's literally just the AI.
yeah,
Yeah. So basically, you can't make a mistake of measuring if the ball is out or not, or if the goal is awarded because the ball is over the line or not. Because you cannot, you just see it. You see, even
yeah,
if it's 1 millimeter. The problem
yeah,
with the VAR we have, for example, in football, is that you get the opportunity to see the situation, you get the opportunity to
yeah,
look back at it,
yeah,
but unfortunately there is always a human decision behind it,
yeah,
and the human error is in everything. So
yeah,
until we have a computerized decision maker which will literally be loaded with some algorithm which will read the game and say,
yeah,
well, this is foul, this is not a foul, this applies to
yeah,
the rule, not, there will be always the subjective
yeah,
referee position in
yeah,
anything you do, and that's probably the hardest one in football or any
yeah,
sport. If you have
yeah,
one referee with subjective decision
yeah,
making one way, and the other one on the field
yeah,
feels about it different, then we have this gray area where it
yeah,
can lead to confusion, or it can lead to decisions where everybody goes like, "Whoa, this thing is
yeah.
not working." But
Well,
let's
here's a
not forget, it's is the human
yeah,
is the
yeah.
human error sometimes.
Well, here's a great example. Here is the referee, and those physics teachers online to know today will know about the principle of parallax. In other words, whatever angle you look at, the view is different. So here's what may have been maybe a possible offside, but then when you look at the VAR, you find that it wasn't an offside. So it's things like that data can be good for. It can be bad for, but maybe in the comment box, if anybody here is on, maybe you could tell us in a quick vote whether or not you think the data, and particularly VAR, has been good for the game or not. That'd be interesting to hear from you. Just a Y or a no will be fine. Okay, well, that's it then. The data and education really is just to show you that how we can bring this back into the classroom. A spirometer can be used to look at tidal volume and measure levels of fitness. For example, EKG sensor can measure your T waves and your S and V curves and all those things. I don't know a whole ton about this. I think there is an S curve. I forget anyway. But also looking at your respiration belt, looking at, for example, your explosive speeds, and how that functions. Another interesting one was the 3D accelerometer that you can put on either end of a weight, and you can look at that very important impact, that high velocity push up that they have to do to get from this position to this position, and they can see exactly how that velocity acceleration takes place. So this is just examples of how to bring data back into the STEM, into the classroom, and how to connect with sports. Here's an example of a couple of kids here using a heart rate monitor, jumping up and down and looking at data then on a device that we'll call a LabQuest or an iPad or whatever, using Bluetooth technologies. And for any of you teachers that would like to do this, we have a lot of experiments available to you. You can go online, get them, contact me personally. I can get these experiments to you for human physiology and lots of different applications. So hopefully we've just left enough time now for some questions. Thank you so much, Peter. That was brilliant as usual, as always. We've had lots of chats about that, sure, in the past, and no doubt in the future. So on behalf of myself and Peter, thank you so much for your attention, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Peter. This was very interesting, a lot of information. And I think it's so interesting to see how many application data can have in sports. And I think that maybe not everyone is aware of that. So that's something that for sure the participants to this webinar will bring home, because you usually associate sport to only to physical, to the physical aspect, and so to who's the fastest, who's the most talented, and so on. And I think this is actually very important for our teachers listening, because this reminds us that there are many ways that children can be involved in sports that are not necessarily as a sportsman, as a sports person, but also, as Vincent was saying, as the person with the iPad on the bench, or for any other sports. So as a data scientist, as a match analyst, performance analyst, statistician, also scout and recruiter, because there is also a big use in that field to find the best player that aligns best with the tactics and so on. And so I think this is important for teachers to understand that they can spark interest in STEM through something that for sure their students like, as it is the sport. So I encourage them to show them in the classroom this webinar once the recording will be available on YouTube. Because of course our aim, our objective is also to promote STEM education and to build, let's say, the future skilled worker in the STEM field. We have some questions from the chat. So one is actually related to a very topical topic related to data, which is the safety, the ethical use of data analytics. Because Felipe says, I am concerned about privacy and data ownership, since me as a sport person would like it to be deleted after I retire. So what aspects are more dangerous and need to be regulated on your perspective?
I think you can. I think when you change club, you can actually ask the club for every information the club has about you, and because you are the person who owns the, who has the ownership of it, so you can actually do that. I don't think that a lot of people probably know, or a lot of people ever ask, but that's in your power that you can go and ask, because the data protection is it's working in there too. So that's something if you ask your club and say, I know I need every information you collected of me, because I'm moving and I'm leaving, then you take it with you. So it should be possible.
Yeah, also as well, it's interesting from the GDPR regulations too, that within Europe, you have the right to be forgotten. That's your fundamental right. And you can request any deletion of any data that's pertaining to you. But a lot of data collection very often is anonymized anyway, and it goes into a pool, and that data then is used as a corpus of data then to learn the sensors learn from, where the benchmarks are, where's the averages are, you know. But yeah, this is a concern for sure, definitely. And if data leaves the European Union to go to America, for example, that also has got to be reported too. And you know, so it is getting there. It needs a lot more regulation, but it is getting there.
So even when you change club, obviously the clubs always ask for your medical history, but the club doctor or anyone involved never gives the information before they get the permission from you as a player. So the first call when you do medical in a different club, they always said, you know, we got the phone call. They would like to access your medical data we collected while you played for us. Do you give us permission to pass it over or not? If you say no, they can't. Obviously, for your best interest is actually to make it happen, but there is a way. If you don't agree, then nobody will take nobody will do it without your consent. So it really improved in a way that it was before.
Thank you so much. We have another question from Vinicius Silva, who asks, how can he use data in his house? And this is for everyone who practices any kind of sports. How can they improve their results using data in a let's say, professional field?
Are you talking about in a school situation or?
No, I think this is more of for a personal.
I think the one thing you can always do is monitor your sleep, your recovery, because that's, they have a lot of things, and then you realize that if you have certain amount of sleep in a good way, then nowadays you have the tracking devices for your day on your watch. So for example, how much you walk, how much how much you spend moving, how much you sleep. And obviously some of the devices you can take swimming. Yeah, so you can actually monitor the load you do, how much you did, and then you can see how much you improved. So that's the simple thing. You can monitor that, and then you look back and you go, oh, I had a week when I've done that. Then I had a good sleep, this amount. My body felt rested, and I had a competition, and I killed it. I was in the top form. So these are the little things which give you, advantages. Or you simply, if you run or you swim or whatever your target is, you can look and track back how you improve, because you need the motivation. Sometimes you want to see how you improve. If people tell you, oh, you look better, oh, it's great, you look better, it's great. But when you see the time, track and field, swimming, these are did you have the advantage? You can track the time and you see how much you did, and then you can see how much your time improved, but can be related as well to your sleep. So that's one thing you can monitor, and you will know your patterns too.
Thank you, Peter. This is not a question, but it's very interesting, coming from Ivo Joking, who says that they are a STEM teacher and also the president of the hockey club in their school in Bulgaria. So this information will be really helpful for them. Okay, I think we are getting to the closing remarks. Thank you so much, Vincent. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much for all the people participating and attending the webinar. This was very interesting, and I think everyone is bringing home the knowledge and the practice you shared. And stay tuned for the next STEM Alliance activities. And have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.